Welcome to Interlochen State Park.
Michigan's first state park. Interlochen State Park has the distinction of being Michigan's first state park, but it was actually created in 1917, 2 years before the official Michigan Parks Commission was created.
It sits on about 200 acres of land that was originally going to be used as a subdivision. There was a guy back in the early 1900s who had a plan to essentially cut the timber from this land, and he had it plotted out to about 53 different lots that people could buy to build houses on. And then that would have been the early 1900s. We started getting into the era of World War I. We got into the Depression era. So a lot of people weren't investing in that kind of thing. And someone came to him and said, I'll give you the price of the timber if you just give me the land. And then he took that idea, went to the state legislature and said, would the state be interested in paying for it? Convinced them to do it. And that's how we got our first state park, is the state bought 200 acres of virgin timber that never got cut. So that was a great way that this all came about. Although when you think about it, you know, at the time, somebody going to the legislature and saying, hey, I've arranged to buy 200 acres of land. Will you now pay for it?
Right.
But more power to him, because he did it.
Good. I mean, it is kind of interesting to think that this could have been a subdivision, and the lots were going to sell for $150 each, payable in either a one-time cash installment or two $75 installments, which you think, wow, that's it. But in 1917, that would have been a lot of money. So, but we have a really cool state park today because of that, because some people had the foresight to think, you know, maybe we shouldn't cut this land down and we should be able to, you know, salvage it and keep it for future generations. This might be a good time to give a little bit of history on Michigan state parks, because you might have heard that Mackinac Island also lays claim to being the first state park in Michigan. And that is true in a different sense. It was actually the nation's second national park, behind Yellowstone, I believe, right? Is Yellowstone?
I think so, yeah.
The first one. There was a fort on Mackinac Island, and so it was under control from a national level, and so they made it a national park. But when the soldiers left the fort, they turned it over to the state, and so it became a state park instead of a national park. And so while it actually lays claim to being Michigan's first official state park, it is run by the Mackinac Island Parks Commission, which is a whole separate entity from the Department of Natural Resources, which runs the State Park Commission. So there are two first state parks, because there's Mackinac Island that's run all by itself, and then there's Interlochen, which is under the control of the DNR with the rest of the park system. So you may see different references to those over the year, both celebrating and laying claim to being the first state park, and they kind of are in their own right because of the way they were created. So, but just wanted to clear up that confusion, because we weren't sure about that ourselves, and that's something that we finally figured out.
And I don't know if we actually cleared it up, but because when you look online and you look at brochures and you talk to people, even at the DNR and outside the DNR, everybody kind of says it differently. Some say Mackinac Island's the first state park. Some say it's Interlochen. Interlochen actually celebrated its centennial 2 years ago, even though this is now the centennial of the state park system this year. It's very confusing, but it's all for a good cause.
Have you figured it out yet? Clear as mud, right?
Right.
As part of Interlochen's centennial, they built this cute little pavilion that they're calling their History Pavilion, and they've got some nice little banners and signs that explain in more detail the history that went on here, but not just here, but in sort of the area in general, the logging history. There's also a little bit of a history of the state park system in Michigan, and talks about the number of users from the very beginning to today, and just the, you know, like the massive increase of people that have come to Michigan's parks over the years, which is awesome. You know, always a good reminder that your tax dollars are and your fees for the state parks are what helps create things like this. So make sure that you get your recreation passport. It's only $11 on your vehicle. It's good for the whole year, and you too can visit 103 state parks. Everything does help build upon each other. And I think that's what's really important, is we wouldn't have cool things like this history park and this pavilion if we didn't continue to support the state parks. Like the people before us that had the foresight to save the land, convince the legislature to buy the property and establish these, we need to be forward thinking like that too. And it's up to all of us to help conserve and, you know, protect and preserve our parks for the future. Definitely the Duck Lake side of Interlochen State Park is the biggest and the most used part of this park. It's got the day use area. It has 2 different modern campground loops with a total of 381 sites. I mean, we're talking almost 400 campsites in this park. And considering it's only 200 acres total, that's a lot of campsites to be crammed in there. But what's really cool about them is they're all wooded. Unlike a lot of the ones that we've been to recently with a lot of sites that they're just flat open, you're on top of your neighbors, it's just no privacy whatsoever. Because this was built in that old virgin pine, you still have a lot of trees. There's a lot of shade. You still have privacy between a lot of the sites, and that's really cool. I mean, not all of them are going to be that way, but for the most part, this is a really cool campground.
Yeah, and you're going to pay the price a little bit when you're trying to maneuver a larger rig because there's narrow roads, there's a lot of trees to go around, but at the same time, once you're in place, it's a really nice campsite. And so, yeah, there's modern campgrounds. There's 2 loops over here on this Duck Lake side. This is where the main beach is. This is where the park store is located at, which actually has a lot of stuff in it for the park store. And so this seems to be where a lot of the activity is happening. There's the playground for the kids is over here.
Yeah, it's a little playscape, and there's like a little choo-choo train that kids can climb on. That seemed to be super popular this morning. The beach, the campground, there's a couple shelters, some swing sets, lots of picnic tables and grills.
Yeah, it seems like a very family-friendly park. And I think part of that is because the Interlochen Music Camp,
the Interlochen Arts
called,
Center, Arts Academy, I think it's changed names a couple times,
is actually right across the road from Interlochen State Park. And you're more familiar with that than I am. So
yeah, if you don't know what Interlochen Arts Academy is, it's both a boarding school for kids in the middle school and high school ages, but it's also just a summer camp for students to come to perfect their music skills. They bring in mini concerts during the year, both very well-known artists from everything from jazz, violin, comedy, and they also do faculty and student recitals on a yearly basis. So when you're here, you can pop across the street. Many of them are free, so that is some cool entertainment in the area. I mean, these are like world-renowned musicians, so it is going to be, very well done, very class act. And I've been told that sometimes on a clear night, you can actually hear the students across the street practicing. So I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, the DNR does mention that on the website. When you go to reserve a campsite, it does mention that Interlochen Arts Academy is right across the street, and you may occasionally hear music being played. I think they warn you because I think sometimes you're going to hear music being practiced, but I don't think it's something about it.
Practice. This isn't like your, third grader on their clarinet. I mean, these are super impressive, very, very well-trained musicians. So it's going to be good practicing. I had a lot of friends here that spent, 6-7 weeks in the summer at camp here, learning and honing their music skills, as well as a couple of friends that actually went to boarding school here and did their high school years here. So it's a really impressive. If you say you went to Interlochen, people are going to know what you're talking about.
Well, what's cool with the state park being right across the street is you could, kind of disconnect from the world and come out here and go camping in the woods and then just walk across the street and find some culture. Yeah. So
it's just a really neat part of Michigan that people don't really realize is here.
Yeah, it's a good combination.
So this is really cool. The state park here has this easy launch for canoe and kayak, and it's designed for people who are in a wheelchair or have some other accessibility issues. And it's this really cool bench system where if you were in a wheelchair, you could pull yourself out, sit down on this bench, sort of slide along. Let me demonstrate here. So you'd slide along, you'd have your kayak positioned here, and then you keep sliding out until you just then, apparently this tips, lower yourself down into your kayak, and away you go. That's ingenious and awesome, just really, really cool, so that we can provide a lot more accessibility for everybody, and so that they can enjoy the same things that everybody else can. In conjunction with this easy launch canoe contraption, they also have a Moby wheelchair here, and we've seen that at some of the other parks as well. But it allows people to get down to the beach, into the water, so that they don't have to ruin their own wheelchairs. They can be in these really cool beach wheelchairs, and they also have an ADA boardwalk, again, so you can get yourself down to the beach, whether you're in a wheelchair or if you're in a stroller or with a cane or something that the sand just makes it a little bit more impossible. So this is a really cool park. It's got a lot of features from an ADA perspective. They did a really good job with it. So maybe someplace that you'd want to check out if that's something that you need.
The Green Lake side of Interlochen State Park is the much quieter side. except for the birds that you can probably hear. But
But it's nature.
it is
That's why
nature.
we picked the rustic side.
Nature counts. So yeah, we camped on the rustic side, which on the Green Lake side is the rustic campground. There's actually 2 loops,
About
40.
50 sites total between the 2 loops.
And it's really nice over here. And although it's built into some different terrain in terms of elevations, where the sites themselves are seems to be on the plateaus. So I didn't notice too much problem with leveling at the different campsites.
No.
We've seen tents and pop-ups in here. We've got our Class B in here, plenty of room for that.
They're actually nice big sites. So I mean, we have neighbors, but there's some trees in between us, so you don't really feel like you're right on top of each other. But most of the sites actually seem to be pretty spread out. So you've got not privacy per se, but just space to be in.
Yeah, I really like this rustic campground. The other side campgrounds, they're the more modern ones. Speaking of elevation, like I did here, it's the south campground that's built into more of sort of the natural terrain.
It's pretty hilly in a couple places. Pulling your rigs, you're gonna have to watch your brakes just to make sure on some of those downward slopes.
Yeah, and some of them you're going to be leveling yourself more than others just based on the way the terrain is. I think the north campground is a little more modern and they've leveled it out a little bit more over there.
I think the biggest thing noted is just because of all the trees backing your rig in and out and watching, again, for other vehicles and kids and cars and trees while you're maneuvering. We saw one travel trailer that his back end was literally like within a couple inches of the tree at the back of his spot because he was so long. So
and I don't know where he was going to put his truck, because as you and I've talked about this with Jesse just recently, that not only are people using larger rigs now, but they're hauling them with larger trucks. So we've seen people hauling rigs that are a good size, but then the truck they're hauling it with is as big as our entire camper.
Right.
Because we're in the Class B. So you got to figure out where you're going to put your your tow rig as well.
Well, I mean, remember, this park was built in 1917, and those big rigs and those big trucks did not exist. So you kind of have to take that into consideration if you show up someplace and go, oh my gosh, this doesn't work. Well, remember, those weren't around back then. So we were talking pop-ups and station wagons and little cars and, Model A's and, much smaller units that people were camping in.
Right. And for a park that was created around virgin timber, it's not like they're going to take trees out if they don't have to improve the campground. So just deal with it. You'll enjoy it once you're in place.
Well, at first it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot here at Interlochen. You've got 2 campgrounds, and the 2 lakes, and that's about it. And you think, well, that's not really a lot, but it's because of the location of where Interlochen is. You're just south of Traverse City. You're just east of Lake Michigan and Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. So there's a lot going on in the vicinity of Interlochen. And I think that's what makes this park so popular is, you've got the Interlochen Arts Center right next door for concerts. You've got Traverse City, which is home to all the wineries, the Traverse City Cherry Festival, and just a ton going on there. As well as you're pretty close to the Leelanau Peninsula, Glen Arbor, like I said, Sleeping Bear Dunes. And so this is a really good place if you want to come and get away, but be able to take in all of those other sites. You're maybe a half hour away from all those things.
Yeah, and I would actually, we've been to Traverse City State Park, and I would say if you're interested in doing the touristy stuff in Traverse City, I'd consider staying here at Interlochen, because I think you'd have a better camping experience, but then you're not that far away to get to Traverse City, depending on what's going on and some of the traffic you might have to deal with. But for most of the year, I think that would be the way to do it.
Yeah, this is a really nice park. I honestly wasn't sure what to expect because I'd heard it was a fairly small park considering there aren't any trails here. I think there's like a 1 mile loop maybe kind of through the campground. But it's location. They always tell you that in real estate, right? That's what this park has going for it. And I think it's just a very nice park. It's old, so it has a very rustic feel, even in the modern side. And I would totally consider, camping here again. I think this is really nice.
Yeah, you'd love it, because then we'd have, the art center right across the street. And you go watch all the concerts that you want to go see. So yeah, check it out if you get a chance. Interlochen State Park is one that I would recommend. I think clearly you would recommend it as well. But whether we recommend them or not, go out and find a park that you want to try. Keep on trekking.
And we'll see you out there.